things that's happening on an important topic, certainly in Singapore, which is the rise of the independent agencies, the boutiques, and I think we're probably going to get into that within the first topic anyway. I think for the last, I want to say 10 years, maybe we'll get into that, but that's really been the impetus towards where things are going.
Yeah.
And so the reason I was really interested in talking to you is to find out more about Jude Foo, GM, General Manager of 928. You guys have been in the Singapore market for 4-ish years now, I'm
Coming to four
guessing.
years. Coming to 4 years. Yeah.
You guys pretty much were birthed at the other end of COVID.
Yes.
That's going to be a conversation we need to have, which is like the kind of uh, courage that it also requires to get into that during a very um, uncertain time. But life has to go on, and we all have to make progress with what's going on in advertising. And 928 is one of those agencies who are really trying to change the game in Singapore.
Hmm.
And in a way, this is a nice segue into the first topic. You've not always been in an independent setting. You, like many of us, have come from an MNC multinational background.
Yep.
What do you think about the evolution of how, certainly where Singapore was when you would have started, which I'm guessing 15-ish years ago,
Hmm.
to where we are now? And what do you think of the differences?
Well, glad we're finally having this chat, Z. It's been a long time coming. I'm really excited to have chat with you on this. So, I would say when I first came into advertising, I actually started because of my sister. She was in advertising. She was in Ogilvy and Mather back then, and I started as an intern there, maybe 20 years ago thereabouts. And after graduation, that was the place I wanted to be, right? Because back then it had its own building, the O&M center, Ogilvy and Mather
Yeah,
Center.
next to Lau Pasad. Yeah,
Yes,
that one.
that's the one.
Yeah.
Old Singtel building. So right from one historical, you know, big cornerstone business in Singapore, you know, and the agency was housed in it, uh, almost like a mini city, if you would. It really was that agency that brought together all disciplines right under one roof. I don't think they succeeded in being seamless in rolling out the service as an integrated one through like PR, digital back then, right? Of course, digital was a standalone under Ogilvy One, and then advertising itself, adaptation, studio work, for example, right? But everyone was in that building, and they did try to sell a service, and that was, I mean, they were pretty much the biggest agency when I joined them. I think it made me. I think just to put it very simply, it made me proud, right, to be in advertising because I was in this place where people walking around, people who walk past, right, who didn't know what Ogilvy Meter was, had at least heard of Ogilvy Meter, and I think testament to that was how my dad, who is Chinese educated, no inkling about what advertising is about, right? A bit more old school, has own business and everything, and even he knew or had heard about Ogilvy, right? Not necessarily Ogilvy Mather because that it itself was the business in Singapore, but he had heard Ogilvy because he shared the story with me that Ogilvy had actually advised, right, some of the Chinese officials during some event or something, and because he's Chinese educated, he's a bit more plugged into the news. So when he knew my sister was joining, and when he heard that I was gonna follow in like 2 years later, he actually told me that yeah, it's a really big agency, right? Multinational agency, truly multinational, right? Global leader, huge thing, and yeah, that made me proud that I was going to join an agency like this, and yeah, never loved the 2 years I was there. Was hard because in a place where there are 400 people, when you're starting out as an account executive, you really start out at the bottom, right? So uh, you really had to learn everything from scratch. You had all this big wigs and all these creative leads, business leads coming in from all around the region, and it was fantastic. It was a real eye opener for me. It was really seeing how people operated, and also that was a time where Tam Kai-ming was also promoted to the global CCO role. So that was a really big thing for us. I mean, he was regional CCO, and then he made global. So that was huge news for us as well, and that really brought even more people, regional resources, regional headcount, and regional talents in. So that it was a really good time. I really got to see the agency grow. I really got to see all the really felt like a global agency, even though I never stepped foot working outside of Singapore. At that time, uh, it really gave me a real good insight and view into how like a creative agency is like,
Uh,
elsewhere.
I think what you're citing is what a lot of us um, would have cited back in those days, which is we are living in a certainly at least in a Singapore terms a golden era of advertising where
Mhm.
the best of the best was coming out, and
Yeah,
we didn't have to leave our neighborhood to get it
yeah,
within our industry. But to come back a little bit more to the point at hand, yeah, we've been there and we've seen that. And
yeah,
you know what? A lot has changed since then.
yes.
And I I know you've come up the account servicing ranks before your partnership GM role right now, but a lot has happened even before 928 in
Hmm.
terms of the landscape. I think what I might ask you to do then is talk a little bit more about. All right, so now fast track. You said you've been doing this for about 20 years. You started as an intern at Ogilvy. Now let's say we fast track it by 15. Let's call it DDB.
Yeah,
Okay, because now you're in a position of more authority. You have been growing career wise anyway, but now you're in a position where you're seeing a lot of things that are happening. Rather than talking about individual brands like a DDP, tribal otherwise,
yeah,
tell me a little bit about the landscape of how you've seen the arc of the power of multinationals have changed so we can eventually lead into the kind of things that you guys are doing now.
yeah. Um, well, it's not a easy topic to talk about, right? I think most business leaders would know, right? But it's not something we want to talk about because I'm afraid there's not a lot of good, right? When I'm talking about it, yeah, I'm not saying that the industry and growth has sort of fallen off a cliff, but the industry has been shrinking, right? And it's been shrinking for a while. Um, yeah, I think when the financial crisis, the first, I would say,
Oh, eight? You're
not
talking
the
about
yeah
oh
oh 08,
08?
yeah, not the 97. I think that still that hit, but I think in terms of communications and creativity, that I don't think it suffered much. But I think 08 was when you sort of saw things happening, like businesses really were impacted, right? And let's say we just use Ogilvy as a model, very dependent on huge Asia Pacific accounts that sort of able to support 30 to 50 people teams, right? You can imagine the volume of revenue they were bringing. Um, Started going, right, because of market forces. Um, and I think it's a domino effect, right? Because if you start losing clients, you start losing the ability to hire in those creative directors who are either very famous, very well known internationally, or you lack that pool to be able to continue supporting your creative directors to do whatever they needed to do.
Hang on a second. Are you saying are you saying the change happened as early as oh 08? Is that what you're saying?
I would say yes. I don't think there's a year from '08 onwards where you can say that advertising grew.
Okay, to reframe, what you're saying is that financial crisis and the spillover effect of it was the start of the change. That was a snowball effect.
I would say that it was something that really started, how businesses or how advertising agencies were starting to look at the business models as well, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would probably put it both in terms of quality and quantity, right? I think just in terms of it's a very simple way of looking at or representing the industry, right? Uh, I shared, you are aware as well. Ogilvy started when I joined Ogilvy, we were 300, 400 plus, right? Since then, right, the only other agency that managed to hit that kind of people, right, just in terms of
DDB.
quantity, yeah, DDB, right, and that was the time you and I were, probably there as well, right, 400 plus, 300 plus, sustained it for quite a while. But I think the difference between where the Ogilvy guys and the DDB guys will, uh, in terms of, okay, so this one is going to be a bit sensitive, right? But I'm just basing this very superficially, right? In terms of the kind of overseas talents that we were sort of seeing Ogilvy having and DDB having, right? So if you look at a 400 plus Ogilvy shot versus a 400 plus DDB shot, and this was probably only about between
Yeah, but there was a 5 year gap
yeah,
between Ogilvy
thereabouts,
400 and DDB 400, right?
thereabouts, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
you also saw I also saw ex colleagues from Ogilvy, you know, coming to DDB, right? It's a small market, right? For you know, overall, right? So ever since Ogilvy hit that mark, had their own building, start losing, started winning, started losing, right? All par for the course, right? You sort of see the agency going, but as you know, since then it's never been able to hit or reach that peak, right? In terms of just its local operations, I wouldn't say anything about regionally, right? And then you saw CDDB coming on as well, right? And even though it had that quantity, I wouldn't okay. The quality part I think comes from really just the overseas talents that they bring in. Definitely in terms of volume, way less than what I used to see in Ogilvy as well.
You're talking about DDB's overseas talent?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm looking at their regional MDs. I know they were. I know you and I both know who was there at the time. But just in terms of like, if you look at people like there was okay, Eugene Chong did join DDB in the end, right? So to be fair, I can't use Eugene and I'm coming as a like for like. But if you look at where there was Tam Kai Ming, there was Eugene Chong, we had
We
people
don't have
coming
to
up.
mention names if we have to get too sensitive about this, by the way.
Hey,
Keep going.
it's a reality, right? People know, right? People know. For example, Megan Gaxiola joined, right, as I think
Gax joined DDB?
no,
Oh, yeah,
joined
he
Ogilvy
did.
right back then, right? So
Oh, Ogilvy. Yeah, yeah, sure, sure,
you had
sure, sure,
him,
sure.
you had sorry, I can't remember his name, but planning director from France, Gwen, I think, tall guy, can't remember exactly, right?
Keep going. I don't want to be the one mentioning names. You're the one mentioning names.
But I mean, imagine if you look at it, right? Almost every single, with the exception of Mark Wong, right, head MD of advertising back then, almost every single discipline lead was an expat, right? And I think where you see the difference between DDB is CEO is local, uh, head of creative, when Neil is kind of I guess local, right?
Mr. Johnson, yeah.
Yeah, and so most of the CDs were local as well, right? So I
Look,
mean, yeah,
I don't want to rain on your parade in any way, but
go for it.
all I would say is, look, I think the makeup of an ad agency, whether it's expat versus locals. Remember, I was an expat when I was working in Singapore, so in a
I know.
way, I'm speaking on from that front. Um, I think the makeup of an ad agency's workforce is also based a lot on the type of clients you have. Now, DDB had a green telco. I forget the name of the.
Starhub,
You don't have to mention it.
yeah,
We don't have to mention brand names. Um, and it was a powerhouse as a brand. And DDB had a lot of powerhouse local brands, but that was one of the things that really kept the lights on.
yep.
And I would imagine that that would have also shaped. I mean, you're an account servicing background guy. Don't you think that is is more reflective of why the demographic of DDB versus Ogilvy was different?
Could be, but I think that doesn't change the conversation that if DDB had the strength to be able to grow regionally, um, and there were also regional connections, right? I think what the previous head of DDB was trying to do as well, in branching across. Um, if you had the quantity and the connections, and you could bring the right resources to get a job done, on regional accounts, why wouldn't they, right? But look, if the regional accounts had stayed put, right, we would have seen, just based on logic, right, another agency either growing with the decline of Ogilvy, for example. Um, DDB was one, of course, but more on the local business, right? But we would have seen, right, if those businesses had stayed put, logically, right, that the workforce would have moved somewhere, or the clients would have stayed put, or we would have seen maybe more influx of regional credits going to a certain agency, for example.
But
But
what does that say of what does it say of 928 then? So are you suggesting then, and this is we're having an honest conversation here.
sure,
Are you suggesting then that if 928 got to the same heights as an Ogilvy or a 928, touch wood,
yeah.
for you guys, that you would start then tapping into foreign talent? Is that the conversation? Is that what you're saying? Because that's the implication of the comparison between one and the other, right? Unless
Um,
I'm missing something.
no, no, you're not. I think I, s- I strongly believe, right, that there is talent to be found here, but that pool has gotten smaller and smaller over the years, right? I think to the point right now where we are open at looking at talents outside of Singapore if they are suitable, right? For various reasons, right? They could be coming with a very, very different point of view, versus, I mean, we are seasoned in a way, but we may not be seasoned in a way where, we know how things, the local clients might be like, the local clientele be like, the local ideas might be like, right? But might be lacking a spark somewhere, right? That always helps with fresh thinking, right? It could also be, having some clients here who want to do something a little bit differently, right? Or who have some regional assets they want us to sort of look after and develop, right? So to me, best person for the job, right? We are always here to support local. I want to make it very clear, right? That's where we are. Most of our clients are local, but we have worked with clients with projects overseas as well, and it's there are a couple of reasons why we can't tap on our local talents to get those jobs done overseas, right? One is cost. Second is just logistically, it just doesn't make sense for us to execute something out of Singapore. For example, we did stuff in Malaysia, we have done stuff in Australia before. Yeah, it just, for me, very simple things, right? Like, I just can't bring an event organizer over from Singapore to Australia. I was working with, partners in Australia who understood it better for a client that was based regionally as well. So I mean, just citing an example from.
So look, this might be a question I wasn't planning on asking, but because you would
Ask away.
know this
Yeah,
end of this conversation, is this also a matter of, and this is going a little bit off advertising, yeah?
sure.
Singapore is a very it's not the cheapest country in the world to live in. It's definitely not
No.
the cheapest country in the world to keep the lights on.
Yep.
Is this a matter of looking at the numbers and going, with what we have at a local level and our fantastic, great local clients, in order for us to grow, we need to be looking at a plan B and a plan C, and a plan B and a plan C includes being able to attract clientele and vis-a-vis talent as a result of that as an independent Singapore born agency. Is that where it's coming from?
So it's going to be tough, right? If we could see the same injection we had maybe 15, 16 years ago back in the Ogilvy days, and the early 2010s, um, I think it would have happened already. But again, like you mentioned, one of those topics we're going to talk about, COVID, right? The moment that hit as well, I think that hit the reset in terms of a lot of regional expansion plans, just because there's a rise of the global citizen. You can work anywhere, right? Um, people geographically who have had to move out or been forced to move out or not come back to Singapore have just stayed put, right? It's just a reality of like you said, right? Things just gotten more expensive post COVID. Um, we're just not seeing those clients come back again, right? It could be the financial thing, right? Starting from '08 where it had made some cuts to slowly realizing that, hey, as it's like dominoes, right? You start losing clients. You can't keep the lights on for your creative or those creatives that used to come overseas, those multinational creatives who are used globally, right? Who used to travel globally to get the jobs done. We can't afford them anymore. We used to call them the $1 million CDs, right? A few of them used to over drinks share that, hey, you used to get a cool $1 million a year for doing stuff, and that used to be shocking for us who have heard it, right? But then you realize that it's true because there were businesses that really were able to pull out the checkbook for them to be able to support them that way. Gradually, you stop hearing about that. Sort of left the market, and so have the clients as well. I'm not saying that there aren't that kind of big clients here, but we all know for a fact that the Singapore government is the biggest advertiser, right? So if you're
Oh,
looking at
sorry, you got to explain that. What does that mean? What do you mean by Singapore government is the biggest
oh,
advertiser?
so the Singapore government itself is the biggest client we have.
Like the pool of client, is that what you mean?
Yeah, just in terms of like revenue size, the whole of government pie is the biggest, right? They spend the most in terms of advertising, media. Yeah, so
Right, but this is the same government, and I'm gonna pull something out live
sure.
with hiding the people involved. Have you seen this?
Yes, I saw.
What do you think?
I think people need to read the, the article in detail, right? Before they start panicking. Because when I first saw the headline as well, I was like, oh shit, like what's going on, right? Um, yeah, um, I'm not sure whether or not it could be totally accurate here, right? But basically, it's really about making sure that the rice bowls of people working in Singapore and the Singaporeans aren't affected by people doing cheap creative services, and this is not just pertaining to advertising. This is across everything, right? From I think this stemmed from a wedding, from some wedding services stuff as well, right? So something bigger on a whole, but yeah, I saw it. I panicked a little bit. Then I read it in detail, and I was just like, I don't think it severely impacts our industry as a whole, unless
Oh,
yeah, unless you had an army of people working somewhere else. Yeah.
since we've now really gone into this, we weren't scheduled to be talking about this.
Oh, good.
Uh,
Let's go.
let me tell you about one thing. By the way, I agree with you that nothing on headlines is enough for you to make a judgment call. I understand protectionism for as far as a nation is concerned. Like, listen, it's a whether you like it or not, it's a business. We need to make sure that the people who are contributing to this nation, that nation, are paying their due diligence. They're paying their dues, taxation, and otherwise. I get all that. That's kind of beside the point. This was a bit of a red herring segue, but since we're talking about this, I remember once, and because I have access to a few different people like yourself within the industry in the region and across the board, I was talking to in a coded way, a global creative guy,
Hmm.
which means MNC, which means a multinational, who said to me that because I no longer live in Singapore. I spent 13 years there. I'm no longer there. I'm a contractor remotely. And this is going back maybe, actually, not a year, 2 years ago. And I said, hey, listen, you can count on me. I can help you guys out. And this person said something that I wasn't expecting him to say. I revealed him. Not that it's going to be hard to imagine it's a him versus a she, but The reality is there's a lot more people in male leadership positions. He did say to me that the problem that we're having now post COVID, and yes, we are getting into COVID, is that the government has put a squeeze on the type of talent who can come in because a lot of expats left anyway
Hmm.
for self preservation reasons, if nothing else, at the time. And they have kind of tightened up the purses and they made it harder for expats to come back. This person was saying to me that, listen, Z, I'd rather hire you because I'm trying to find the most politically correct way of saying this.
Hmm.
The cost for the local talent that I have now is is output prohibitive, and I'm trying to be as polite as I can, and I'd rather talk to you because you're in a non-Singapore uh, life level, lifestyle, cost of life living, that from a talent point of view, it's a lot easier to do that.
Mm.
And I've had a lot of projects through that reason. And I wonder how, for a guy who is obviously pro Singapore grassroots, let's build this agency, and this is now the time of the indies, the Singapore indies over the MNCs. The door is open. Let's go there. How do you navigate that feeling that some people have that, yeah, but maybe the talent, maybe what put us on that spot was the talent that brought in that level of ideas. This is my opinion. You don't have
Yeah.
to agree with it. I'm just
Yeah.
This is just what I'm seeing.
Yeah. I think when you're working when you're working in an industry that is built on ideas, any kind of fresh thinking helps, right? And I would just say, look, like it or not, if you've been through the educational system in Singapore, right? I I would say it's opening up now, right? My son's going to primary school next year, right? So I have seen and I've been doing more research into this, and yes, things are a little bit different, right? But I guess during my time, right, if you have sort of gone through the rigors of the education system, it is pretty rigid, right? If you study humanities, right, like I took history, right, when I graduated, uh, everyone, I'm not kidding you, right? And this is just maybe 20 years ago, right? Which actually does sound a bit long, but everyone's thing was like, oh, you graduated with a history degree. Oh, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna work in a museum? Are you gonna, literally, right? These were people sort of having this point of views, right? That once you study like engineering, oh, you're gonna be an engineer, right? If you study arts, you're gonna be, working in a library, you're gonna work in a museum, arts and social sciences, for example, right? Then if you study law and medical, then okay, that's pretty straightforward, right? So you had all this fixed path for you, and I would say that we have come some way, right, from that in terms of having more schools of thoughts and everything, right? But if you're talking about creative industry, can you imagine people who have gone through this local channels and rigor, getting them to think outside the box? How are you going to do that, right? And until you have people who have might be a little bit unhinged or who have really done things outside, they had to really push the edges of what communication could be like, and then had to be sort of pulled back by the local people or the government and stuff, right?
You mean like people who can do graffiti outside
Yeah,
Somerset Park?
yeah, potentially. And then just outside the center, and then get caught, put in by the cops, right? But hey, person is doing fine, right? Now a legit artist and stuff, right? But look, that is the extent we're talking about, for real. If we didn't open up, or we didn't have those channels to bring those people in to sort of show how, sort of push the boundaries and literally to think outside the box, how would we have thrived as a creative industry? I think that would be very difficult. To be very open, right? I don't mean in disrespect to all the people who have been living here. And look, I'm Singaporean myself, but I would say that I have learned a lot, from the local leaders here, and I've also learned equally as much, or perhaps a little bit more from leaders out overseas. I'm not saying good. I'm not saying good things, right? I'm saying there are ways of managing things that you probably wouldn't have thought about, right, if you didn't have that kind of exposure. So I would say that it's the if we didn't have those talent coming in, yeah, we wouldn't have thrived as much as the market.
Do you think I was never planning to talk about Singapore to this extent? Do you think Singapore, because of the legacy of success that big multinationals have made within the framework of Singapore in the last, not last, but in the previous decade plus,
Hmm.
that the Singapore policymakers have not realized the things like I pull up on the phone,
Yeah.
and the rules put in place about stringent foreign talent qualification requirements, blah blah blah. Do you think advertising as an industry has been left behind in terms at a local level? Do you think it's not so much about, we're all having problems.
Yeah.
Clients are dwindling, budgets are diminishing, but do you think these efforts that have been made in the version COVID point oh of Singapore, uh, ign- uh, leaving behind an industry like advertising in Singapore?
Uh,
Because remember, they have seen, because these are intelligent people. It's a very intelligent nation.
yes.
They've looked at the numbers. They go, this industry's okay. They know what they're doing. They're very buoyant. They're very lucrative. They're very profitable. They will be okay with what we're putting forward, because perhaps at a governmental level, and I know neither of us are qualified to talk at a Singapore government level, nor
Yep.
should we,
Yep.
especially because I'm not a Singaporean. But what I'm saying is, in this context, do you think that these rules put in place where they're putting firewalls against bringing in more foreign talent, that they've missed a trick of what made Singapore advertising at a global level conversation?
Okay, so in terms of I mean, let's have that. If we talk about just in terms of representation of the workforce, right? In terms of foreign talents coming in and local talents, the measures that we have now largely were already in place pre-COVID, right? So I mean this in terms of the S pass, the E pass, and everything, right? So you already had this where the government was already actively promoting us putting
Transition into more local
local
workforce.
first, right? But again, not to a point where we're suffocating ourselves with these talents, right? And I think if and actually I was actually doing a piece with actually the content piece with the uh with you know a minister last year as well, where we were able to chat with this minister in terms of manpower issues and everything, right? And this minister was also very forthcoming to share that as a nation we can't survive ourselves, right? If we become too insular, it just can't work because we really are geographically bound, right? But not when it comes to talent, right? So a lot of the measures were put in place to make sure that they try to protect the locals and the Singaporeans, right, and people who are permanent residents here, but still giving us access to people we feel be suitable, right? So like the quota system, for example, it's been in place since pre-COVID.
Sure.
And for us, look, if as an agency, we are we have enough quota to go out and hire foreign talents as well, right? Because we've always prioritized looking at who are the right talents, and if possible, we'll try to support those who are here locally because they understand the landscape a little bit better, right? We have also spoken to people outside of Singapore, right? And eventually, either because of opportunity cost or just timing, and just I guess maybe just in terms of comparing, right, the what we can do with either, that we've you know mostly stuck with the highest that are here in Singapore so far. So, but look, nothing's stopping us there is no one saying that, hey, you guys need to, hire only locals and stuff, right? I think that has something that has never happened before. I think even with that headline that you were showing just now, yeah, I think the right thing to remember is just that, there are measures put in place to protect, but there are measures as well to allow us to bring in those resources if we need to, right? So nothing's stopping us from doing that.
Okay, so look, we've taken a detour. I don't think it was a bad detour. I think it was a very productive detour, especially because I mean I have a emotional stake in Singapore as well since I've lived there for a long time. So I'm glad we did this. But to use the narrative to continue on with the narrative that you just mentioned about um, you're not forced to hire locals. You can always expand. It all comes down to means rather than laws put in place. Great, fantastic. So then let's talk about the the operations of what it's like to run um, an ad agency. You're GM with three other partners, and you are in an unenviable position of being the only non-creative of your four of the four partners. Tell me a little bit about what it's like, because you haven't had a role like this at this capacity, even though you've done it within multinational companies and local ones, govt, etc., etc. But what is it like? What is it like to get on that saddle and I'm sorry if I'm verbally raping you to tell me about bit about what the fuck is going on. How's things going? How are things going, man?
Oh man, where do I start? Like, no, it's a it's something that it really was something that was shared with me in when I was starting in Ogilvy, right? That it's called a creative agency or a creative business for a reason, right? The word creative, it tells you a lot about what we do, and and to me, I had no qualms about bringing on three creatives to be partners, because I still believe in the power of creativity, right? It comes, and every day I'm challenged by how that my partners are creatively trying to get around processes that I've set to make our lives better, right? Like creating secret decks that I can't access, and then having to request them separately to give me access to every single deck, especially when they're
You are one
away.
of those guys, huh? Okay, okay, interesting,
Yeah,
interesting.
I'm one
Okay,
of those,
go on.
and I'm one of those because there could be an urgent request coming in and I can't find the deck. And you know why? Because it's not in the server, right? So it's been it's been coming 4 years, man, and I still have to deal with shit like this. So you gotta cut me some slack here, right? So no, but that aside, which is not surprising to be honest, right? Creators are creators. It's it I would say it's been a good learning experience, and I say this because they come in from, even when we sit down, and this is a rule, right, on the business front, and we have this in the agreements, in the directors of the company, and just how we operate. We need a clear majority in any decision that we make, right? So, and if you think about it, that means that as long as the three creators gang out on me, then I'm shit, right? There is no veto vote, right? I said that about the name earlier on, but there is no there is no real such clause, right? Uh, the company rules just state that as long as three out of four directors agree on something, and as long as there's a majority, yeah, we're good to go, right? So yeah, it's never come to that.
You were talking about the intra political makeup of what it's like being with 928. I guess I am with full respect to your other three partners. I'm interested in you more in this case. My question to you is, how does Jude Foo find being put in a situation where he's never been before,
Right.
while still holding up the equity and cachet and importance of creativity, regardless of the fact that you have three creative partners right now. How are you dealing with it, defending it, living with it? What have been the learning curves? Talk about you.
Uh, um, I won't say there's okay. So I'll start with the last point, the last thing you mentioned, which is learning curve, right? I've always been pretty hands on in business, not in terms of the micromanaging of stuff. So understanding the process, implementing the process, the finances, uh, being a bit more mindful about the overheads, operational P&L, all those things I've always been very closely involved in. Uh, so not an issue. Um, I would say the learning curve has really been really to along with the CDs as well try to drive the agency. There is we've taken a very strong people approach first in our agency, which
People as in workforce?
yeah, just our people, right? Because we've and COVID in the last few years have just proven that that I think a lot of bad decisions get made or a lot of bad planning is done.
You
Or,
started post COVID though, right? Well, you started 2021, right?
yeah, I was like, so like,
After lockdown, but still in the fog of COVID.
yeah. So I mean, COVID already got a lot of people scared, right? Because um, you're starting to worry about things, very simple things you never thought you had to worry about, which is like your rent, right? Paying 50,000 a month for an office space that one person comes into, right? For the whole of
Sure.
a year, right?
Oh, so this you guys started before COVID then?
No, started 2021.
Why
Uh,
would you why
yeah.
would you need to why would you need to fork out 50,000 if you know
No,
you're
I'm just saying, just in terms
overrun?
of the outlook, right? Of
Right.
how
Okay.
people start worrying and everything, right? Like people are being let go because there's just so much uncertainty, right? Business never knew when you're going to reopen the borders, right? And just the whole global economy as a whole, right? So things are going to shit. People are panicking. People are leaving. People could not come back to Singapore, right? So there were some people who really just quit because they just couldn't see themselves, had no planning to be able to come back, right? Then it just came down to a point where, and I think this is something I shared with quite a few people when we started, or when I first started trying to get the agency together, right? That in probably my whole career, that was probably the lowest point for me because when we started 928, I needed suits, right? I reached out to, I would say 20, 30 plus people, 20, 30 plus of the suits I used to work with. 60% of them were leaving or had left advertising, right? Um, and the remaining were, I would say another 20% were planning to go, right? And this was probably just seeing out the last gig and then you're going to call it quits.
It's, are you
Yeah.
talking about a reflection of you being the only non-creative person who's jumping into this very big decision in your career, and you don't have like-minded supporters and team behind you?
Yeah, that is eventually, eventually that. But I think it's just down to you know the overall industry state, lah, right? So it's been tough, right? I think just like having no one to bounce ideas off, it does get tricky, right? Um, Most of my previous roles, I've always had either my group CEO or even my
Yeah, someone to
MD,
talk to.
yeah, or someone to sort of spar with, right? Or seek some guidance from as well. So I would say starting this, and look, I'll make it very clear that all my previous mentors have never closed their doors, right? They're always happy if I need to seek some advice and stuff, right? So that those doors are always open. But I think eventually, when it comes to still having to make a call or make a decision in terms of what impacts the agency, when it comes down to that level, it's hard for you to go to someone and who doesn't understand, who doesn't see it, to be able to give
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
sometimes only family members can understand family matters, right? That's what it's
Well,
about.
my wife is in advertising, so that she understands.
Okay.
I guess she understands all too well. Unfortunately or unfortunately, but but yeah, I think that's all. I would say when the four of us sit down together, yeah, there's a lot of respect in terms of both sides, right? When they hear me give them a business proposition or solution, there's a lot of respect in terms of like them being able to like, yeah, okay, I would have never seen it from that point of view. Likewise, when I give them a creative brief or a creative opportunity, like a pitch opportunity, and for them to be able to turn around and say, probably might not be able to take it on because of this reason and stuff. Right? For me, I would never have seen it from their perspective as well, and it helps to have three different perspectives as well, right? Of how they're sort of seeing things as well. So yeah, it's I would say it's a learning curve from a very different perspective, right? Where a lot of times when we sit down, we discuss, and we arrive at conclusions, that becomes a learning journey versus me, maybe talking to someone who has gone through it before and being able to advise on the potential outcomes or the potential pitfalls and stuff. And yeah, and I would say a lot of it is also having to sort of navigate it and do some game planning, right? In terms of like, okay, if this is going to happen, if this happens, plan A. If this happens, plan B. If this happens, plan C. Right. So yeah, it's a lot of that, and hoping that plan A, B, and C don't bankrupt the agency. Yeah.
Putting environmental factors aside, what would you say as a first time owner partner of an agency in Singapore post COVID? Number one, what was easier than you thought was going to be easy? What was harder than you had expected it to be? Holy shit, that's tough.
Yep. Yep. Oh.
Start with easy. Start with reprieve. What was it that one you went like, damn, we're gonna do this, but hey, this is not so bad. I've got a grip on it. We can figure this
Yeah.
out. And conversely, what did you think might have been like, yeah, this is well, I will preempt that I think what you might say is not easy is getting clients and money, but I'll leave it to that. But
Well.
let's start with the good. Let's start with the good.
Okay. So
What was something you didn't expect was going to be as smooth as you had expected?
um, I would say the support of other agency owners, right? And
And these are all local agencies
yeah,
or
yeah. Yeah.
everything in between.
I would say everything in between, right? So when we first started, or um, when we first started, a couple of people in my previous role were very supportive, right? In terms of like giving advice, from a business perspective, just in general, just sharing, their own experiences, and stuff when they sort of went into their role, right? So, and even down to, I made a call to um, an owner of a digital agency that I used to work with. The agent, I was working with in my previous agency roles,
Good man. Let's
because I
not
knew yeah,
mention names. Yeah, good.
yeah, and
Yep.
because I knew that he had an office, and post COVID, right? He was transitioning to work from home model, but he already just renovated the office, beautiful 2 stories, and no one was coming in, right? Because they just transitioned to a hybrid model, which made sense for them, right? Um, and that's how we got our first office location, right? He offered a ridiculous rate, and I don't mean it from a like what, it was really like a, oh wow, like really friendship rate.
Kindness. It was like,
Yes.
yeah, it was altruistic decision to
Exactly,
be made. Yeah.
right. And look, and it could easily have been seen as, man, dude, you're setting up your own creative agency. It might not be a digital first or digital led agency, but hey, you guys are still competitors, right? Because they had their own creative team doing, stuff for other clients as well. But there was really none of that. He was happy to share the pitfalls of how his partnership starting out, because his own partnership went through a few rough patches. So he had one or two partners leave on not very good notes, right? So he was sharing his own experiences about it. What kind of issues I might face, bringing on three other partners, and how things were like. And so that really helped to shape, at least in terms of the foundational setup, right, of the agency, and he was really kind in providing us a space for really 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 low price in a relatively prime location. So yeah, that was the easy part, which really was like, yeah, I saw him or her at the start of our call as well. So maybe this signifies that this is getting to the good part. Yeah, I don't know.
Bali life. Yeah, it's all life, man. Yeah, keep going. Sorry, brother. Keep going.
No, but so that was a good part. Like I was able to make a couple of calls to people, and they were 100% supportive in giving advice, sharing some advice, giving me some angles to start or to grow the business. Because we started with a client already, right? So that's hence 928, right? That was the time we got our first client, right? And so it was really a lot about building the business around it. Because that was a client that I knew relatively well, right? So and sort of we was able to business plan around it. Um, so there was that. So even on the business front, that wasn't too scary. I was able to sit down with the partners to give them the game plan of like, right, this is how much the clients are, this is how much we need to hunt for, right, to make the gap. And in the best case scenario, this is what we're looking at in terms of year one and year two. So I mean, already at the get or the onset, I was able to sit down with them to plan them and sort of prepare them for at least a 12 to 24-month plan, right, which we already had in place. So the easy part was really easier than expected part was really getting the support, right, in making that plan happen, right. So managing our overheads, very low rental, um, tapping on partners, right? And some of them were very open in introducing new partners that they were using as well, right? So, for example, like production partners, right? I mean, we are still a relatively small agency. It's 11 of us, right? So we don't have a lot. We don't do a lot of things in house. We don't do videography in house, for example, right? That's something you need someone to tap on. So a couple of them were also very helpful in sharing their contacts or some partners they used to work with, which we still work with till today. So always very very grateful for them. So yeah, that was the easier than
What what
expected.
what was something that you hadn't anticipated?
Just resource, man, just people, and not the difficulty in handling them, but I think really resourcing and hiring for the agency,
Is this reputation based or just
a mix of everything, right? So
talk about that?
it was you know, the earlier example I was talking about, right? I called 20, 30 plus odd suits that I used to work with. Not cold calling, this is the people I actually worked with, right? So they were able to be very open with me. Um, Probably I think two of them shared that in their current MNC roles that they weren't too comfortable to move because we're a relative new agency and the family planning stuff. One of them was going family planning, the other one was more comfortable just working in a more established scene. So I was like, yeah, that's perfectly cool. Totally understand. That's great. And that wasn't hard to take because I was expecting that, right? We are a new outfit, and we had only just one client that we confirmed, right? So hey, it's going to be a leap of faith for some of them, right? And to be if I was in a situation, I would think twice, right? So no surprise there. But then I'll say 60% of them were thinking of or had already left the industry, right? And a couple of them had been let go during the wave of those COVID retrenchments, right? There were a couple of waves where agencies just didn't have an idea of how long the mayhem was going to last, or how bad the global the how long it's going to take the global economy or even the local economy to bounce back, right? So preemptively, there were cuts made across the bigger agencies. I don't think it's a secret. So I reached out to some of them, right? Opportunistic. We're just saying, look, I know, sad to hear about it, but look, we're doing something which I think could be fun. Would you want to join us? And I think by then, most of them just said that no, whatever had happened during that retrenchment just left a bad taste in their mouth, and they just didn't see any. There was just no joy for them in sort of coming back to advertising, right?
So these are people the 60% you mentioned. These are people who for the most part made the transition out because of retrenchment, not necessarily losing faith in the industry. Is that what you mean?
It was a mix. So I would say that maybe let's say what was 15 to 16 were 15 to 16, half of them were sort of part of the process, right? The by process of like the retrenchments. Some of them left voluntarily because they I just put it bluntly, like, right? When people are let go, it doesn't mean that the work had dropped in the same percentage of people who were let go, right? The people who stayed on are expected to take on the slack, right? Some of them couldn't take it. Some of them couldn't handle it, because it's just ridiculous doing, perhaps maybe two persons role, right? With the energy of just one person, as you would expect, right? And some of them were just disillusioned with the fact that, if an agency could let go of 20% of their workforce, right, within a week, right, it's just a matter of time for me, right? Which I guess also did happen, right, to a couple of agencies as well. So yeah, I think for it was a mix of reasons, right? Some of them were let go, as part of the process. Some of them just didn't want to stay around. Yeah, for various reasons. Yeah.
So look, I've talked to you very pretty much about everything I wanted to talk about, but what I would like us to end on is about Singapore. It 928 can be an extension of this conversation, but it's about the Singapore ad industry. I guess my uh, at least penultimate question might be, where do you think, not just for 928, but for Singapore advertising in general, as a person who's looking at the tea leaves in a different way than a lot of my peers who are from a creative background,
Hmm.
you are not only looking at the value of, let's say, creativity and where it adds value to clients, but also looking at the economics of things. So my certainly one of the last questions to you, and please elaborate as long as you need to. Where do you see, maybe within boutique indies, within advertising in general in Singapore, what's happening now? Where is it going? And where do you see it in the next 5 years?
Oh, well, we just had to end on that, right? Didn't we? All right.
We don't have to. I said penultimate. I can ask another question after that.
Well, um, it's and this is my point of view, right? I just want to put it out there as well, right? But again, having mentioned the fact that I did graduate with a major in history, right? So there's a lot of me going back and sort of looking at trends, right, in terms of what's happening. So if we take a step back and just look at it, the overall shrinking of the advertising industry and the repercussions that it's had on the business model of agencies or creative agencies as a whole, right? The rise of the indie agencies sort of coincided with the, I would say, uh, I don't think the right I don't think the right word is used is the decline, all right, of the multinationals, right? I don't think that's the right word, but I can't find a better word right now, right? I would say maybe it's just a balance, right, of where we are with the businesses and stuff, right? So um, if we compare the trend, right, that the industry is shrinking, the ad revenues are getting smaller year on year, and the fact that agencies have been consolidating, right? The MNCs have already gone through it and are going through it. Strangely, to two of the agencies I've been at are close to have either disappeared or close to disappearing, right? So I was at GWT, yeah, it became WT, and then it just died, right? It just got subsumed by an agency that got subsumed into another agency, right? So I love it. I love how these things are, how they're making this kind of decisions on a global level. But um, on a more serious note, that consolidation of that agency model has already happened on a global level, for the MNCs. And with the trend of the industry getting smaller year on year, right now the independent agencies are able to optimize, I would say, better because we are just more flexible and more nimble, right? It's just a reality that we don't have the kind of regional structures, processes, overheads that the MNCs are handling, right? That's just a reality. So we are able to better optimize to take advantage of that sort of switch, right, or the swing over to the clients from the clients. But it will, it that's what I believe, right? The consolidation will impact the the independent agencies. I hope later than sooner, but I strongly believe that that's what's going to happen. We will start seeing the consolidation of more local agencies because it's just we just are not getting enough talent. We're just not getting enough clients, and we're just not getting enough revenue, right? Just not getting enough money overall in the industry, right? And if you look at where the two big advertising platforms in Google and and Meta are heading, next end of next year they would have fully implemented their generative AI models into creative production. So literally, you have clients who are fully able to self-serve everything from video content, pictorial content, to everything, right? And do it at scale. So I sort of see that as a reckoning for quite scary. I think for a lot of the production or the localization agencies, right? I do believe that it's going to impact them quite badly. And subsequently, when that happens, you're going to start seeing, you know, even more money being eroded away, right? Clients are sort of just dealing directly. It might be better for creative roles in the client side, on the client side, which I hope hopefully will balance things out. But I think even then, I do feel that the in the long run, the creative agencies are going to be it's going to be a pretty rough ride.
Okay, so it wasn't my last question then. Here's a blunt one.
Yeah.
Is 928 picking up? I say 928. I mean a lot of the non MNCs. Are are the independent agencies are the independent agencies right now just picking up the cheaper scraps because that's all that's left?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I would say that um, there were a couple of the couple of sort of independent agencies that sort of led that push, right, to take it to the bigger boys. And I would say I gotta name them, right. I'll say in all fairness, TSLE.
I can bleep it
Yes.
out, so don't worry. Keep going.
Yeah. But I think people need to and to be honest, credit where credit is due, right? I mean, they were the guys who really started to do things differently, take it to clients differently, and I've never worked with them before, right? But look, I think the fact that they have been around, and they've sort of taken different approaches to how they sort of diversify, their creative model. I would say it's good learning, right?
I'm on tenterhooks. Who is this?
TSLA. Yeah.
Okay, the
Yeah.
secret little agency.
Yes. Right. So still trying to keep themselves secret up to now, but it's well,
Are
it's
they still around Circular Road? Is that where they are? They
I'm
used to
not
be.
sure. I think so. I'm not sure, to be honest, but yeah.
Well, that's why they're a secret, I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Oh no, no. But the fact that they're working with, they still have clients like I think DBS and POSB, even STB, right? Whom you expect to go to who has traditionally worked with some of the MNCs, right? And for them to be able to take on that pie, I think it's just kudos to what they've been doing, or kudos to the fact that they're going to win it, right, on their own merit. So I think they were the ones who really, in my opinion at least, really started getting it and sort of flying the flag, right, for the independent agencies against the MNCs, right? And I was there when GOVT won the business for OCBC, which is a big surprise, I think, in the local industry, because this was, the bank clients are uh, the biggest accounts, one of the bigger accounts you can have locally, and for back then an independent agency of 20 plus people to win it was I would say was a headliner, right? In terms of a lot of the agencies believing that, hey, if they can do it, then we can do it, right? And the fact that they still have it 7 8 years now, I think. Um, yeah, it's just to me, it's encouragement, right? If you see it, if you want to see it as encouragement, I think you should, right? The fact that they've been able to do it, not just win it, but still retain it, and hopefully grow it, and have gone on to even win, for example, like Sentosa, right, which is another big account. So yeah, those
Fr-
guys have
from an outsider, you mentioned a lot of names of a lot of clients. And I guess we're coming back full circle a little bit with where you said at the beginning. There is this pattern that's been emerging, and in the last 3 minutes, you've mentioned successful clients with agencies like TSLA, and I can't help but wonder it's because these are clients that are government funded clients. They're not private clients. They're not brand clients. We're in advertising, and there's a part of our our experience that says we have to go after Nike and you know what I mean. But it sounds like the future of a lot of the success of the indies in Singapore are very much fixed in on the government funded clients. I wonder what that says. Not so much about, listen, anyone who can get a government client, no matter where you are, it doesn't care if it's Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, it doesn't matter. It's great because you know you've got someone who has got a myopic attention towards, like, I am here for you. We're going to fund you because we think you're right for us.
mhm.
That's how a brand client relation, or an agency client relationship should be. Do you think that's what Singaporean successful indie might be reduced to at this point? In to use what you're saying, clients are AI, da da da, they can do it, and they don't need us in a few years. But these local clients, these grassroots clients, grassroots government agencies will always need to be associated and connected to grassroots local agencies. Do you think that's where the pot of gold is at the end of the rainbow for indies, at least in the short term?
um, well, it'll keep the lights on for sure, right, and a bit, right. But I would say it's hard to answer that from my perspective, because it really does depend on where the management stand is um, in how they sort of see
Yeah,
where.
but what's your lowest hanging fruit? My question to you is, have I identified an obvious lowest hanging fruit that all the other local indies seem to be using as a North Star?
um, I would say possibly. Again, it comes down to, right. So maybe a simple example would be, when we were able to start 928 because of our first client, right? That sort of,
And you haven't mentioned the client, and we don't have to go
yeah,
there, but
exactly.
are
Yeah.
they a government client or were they a private client?
I know they're a private client. Yeah.
Okay.
So again, so it came from a relationship, a partnership that I had with them previously, and coincidentally, it just came at a point where, 3 months after I left my previous role, when I was just taking a sabbatical, just a break, right, where they were looking at pitching, right, and that was how I was able to, come in and sort of start 928 around that business, right? So that was the opportunity that arose at that point of time, right? So I would say that for the other agencies or other independent agencies, they may tap on they may be tapping on a relationship they had previously, that can be, a relationship with, with a government linked client or a private client, right? So it's hard for me to be able to quantify that specifically, but I would say a good business lead for any independent agency would typically, start with the lowest hanging fruit, and that could be uh, either a private client or a government client. So it really is down to I guess the opportunities that or the connections or partnerships that they could have forged previously. Yeah.
Mr. Jude Foo, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. Thank you that we finally got to do this. A lot of bouncing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, where we finally got there.